All right, everybody. Good evening. Start the meeting by starting with the flag salute, please. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, roll call, please. And I'm just got a text from Dan. He's trying to connect. He says he's just been in.
I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. Okay, never mind. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Chamberlain,
Here.
Mrs. Saylor.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Corey,
Here.
Mr. Dilks,
Still here.
Colonel Hensky,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Lepsis,
Nope.
Dr. McCloy,
Here.
and Mrs. Shoemaker.
Here.
Thank you.
In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, this is to announce that adequate notice of this meeting was given in the following manner. On January 8th, 2020, notice of this meeting was transmitted to the Burlington County Times and the Central Record, filed with the Township Clerk, and posted in the office of the Business Administrator Board Secretary. Additional notification was made on October 28th, 2020, in the Burlington County Times to inform the public that this meeting would be held remotely utilizing Zoom. Notification was also posted in both the district website and the district app. I direct the Business Administrator Board Secretary to enter this statement into the minutes. We're going to start tonight with a presentation on our map testing data. The presenter is Melissa Gallagher, Assistant Principal. It's all yours, Melissa.
Thank you, Maggie. Hold on one second. Let me share my screen. And person. Okay, good evening. We are going to discuss the Tabernacle Township data comparison from fall 2019 to fall 2020. All right, so we're looking at the MAPS data today. We're comparing the fall 2019 to fall 2020 data. We did not have any MAPS data from the spring. We tested two assessments. We did the math and the language arts reading section. The data here includes grades 1st through 8th grade. The kindergartners took a screener test, so we are not going to look at that because we're not comparing kindergartners from last year. The MAPS test adjusts to the ability of the student, and we're also going to be looking at the mean RIT scores and percentiles. That shows the academic readiness that will provide a growth projections, and it gives context if the student is performing at grade level. So there are some factors to look at when we're looking at this data. The first is obviously the COVID and summer slide. A lot of research is indicating, especially NWEA, which is our MAPS testing, that there has been major impact to mathematics. We're also looking at the new educational platforms with our virtual learners and hybrid learners. It's a new way of learning, and implementing technological tools such as Google Classroom and email. A lot of students were not really familiar with how to email, and it's something that they're getting accustomed to. So MAPS actually has a projection that they use here for the COVID slide. They had some research, and this is what they came up with. This is not indicating our Tabernacle students. The straight line is a typical growth of summer loss. Then we have the dashed line, which is the slowdown for COVID, and then the skinnier dashed line is the slide. As you can see at the younger grade levels, there are steeper lines, and they're stating that at the younger grades, they are having the most loss. That was mathematics. This is reading. The reading was not as steep. Again, the prediction as well is here for the younger grade levels. All right, so here are subgroups. We tested a total of 534 students. Our subgroup we based on gender and ethnicity. This is the breakdown of our students for the school year. All right, so let's look at our math data first, grades 1st through 8th grade. We're going to look at our RIT scores and our percentiles. So this is the same students. So when we're looking at 1st grade in fall 2019, this was last year's kindergarten. The RIT score is your growth score. Now at the younger grade levels, you're going to see greater growth. And at the like 6th, 7th, and 8th, you're not going to see as much growth. So when you look at 1st grade, last year in kindergarten, they were 140.8. And then this year jumped up to 166.5. So if we look at each year, we have 2nd grade 159.9 to 180.5. 3rd grade 178.7 to 192.4. And 4th grade, again, we're seeing growth, which is indicating that they are learning. 6th grade, we have 213.2 to 215.3. 7th grade is 221.6 to 225.5. And then 8th grade is 217.1 to 222.1. So as you can see, the higher the grade level we're at, we're having smaller gains, but that is normal. We also want to look at our percentile. So when we look at our percentile for 1st grade, it says 86 percentile. What that means is that we achieved 86% out of the 10 million people or students who took this test. And that's pretty good. So when I talked to our MAPS representative, she actually indicated that she saw multiple schools that had negative growth. This is another display of data.
Melissa, can we ask questions as you go, or do you want us to hold them to the end?
You hold them to the end, that would be good.
Thank
Thank you. Okay, so we have the MAPS RIT group scores. And what we see here is we have bars right here, and the diamonds in the bars, that actually indicates that we exceeded expectations. When we have diamonds on the actual bars, that means we are achieving the growth that we're supposed to be at. And here we're a little below. And again, with math, that's a national concern right now. It was a national concern actually before COVID hit. Our math scores across the nation, and that's where we're at right now. There are some reasonings for the 6th and 7th grade, and we'll get into that in the next slide, but overall we are performing. And if we look at 8th grade also, it said we were at the 39th percentile, but for 8th grade, we are at where we should be. So that is a national standard. All right, so the quick data summary is in our mean RIT scores in all grade levels showed growth. We had significant growth in 1st and 2nd grade. Areas of improvement is 6th and 7th grade, but again, when we have from 5th to 6th grade, students are in one class and they're adapting to class changes, different teachers. Math is extremely important for a building block. So with that 6-month COVID slide, it could affect what they remembering in class. The standards become more challenging. And again, NWEA projections suggest there's a major impact on mathematics scores across, it's a national concern. Right, so now we're going to look at our language arts reading grades 1 through 8. And again, these are the same students. So our RIT scores in 1st grade, we went from 141.2 to 161.2. And again, you're going to see that there's the growth is higher at the younger grade levels, 159.7 to 173.8 for 2nd grade, 175.1 to 191.5 for 3rd, 187.5 to 199.2. We have 196.8 to 207.2 for 5th, 207.7 to 214.5. We have 216.2 to 221.6 for 7th, and then we have 215 to 220.7. Again, the higher the grade level, it's not as much growth as the lower grade levels. Also, if you look at our percentiles, we also targeted above 50th percentile for every grade level. All right, so our next point of data, if you look at this, it states here our language arts and reading RIT growth. So we look here, we exceeded our expectations in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th grade. We hit where we should be at in 1st and 7th grade. And then 2nd grade, we didn't reach it, but there are some reasons for that. In 1st grade, we learned the basic foundations of reading skills. So with the COVID slide, that affected it. And then also we have to remember that the students who are in 2nd grade who are virtual learners at home, they're navigating themselves. They're not getting that additional support they would get in class if they have any questions on how to navigate the test. So the reading data summary, the mean RIT score in all grade levels showed growth. Our data indicates that students are above average or above the 50th percentile. They were all above 50th percent. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th grade exceeded their growth projections. And then again, in the areas of improvement, which I just discussed in second grade, do the COVID slide. First grade is essential for building blocks for reading. And again, with the assistance in navigating the assessment for our virtual learners. So our next step, MAPS research actually indicates, NWEA, that we must consider ways to support students who are academically behind and further differentiate instruction. So right now in Tabernacle's Township's model, we're including the flipped classroom model, which is gearing each student to learn on their own pace at their own time. We also have Ed Puzzle, which is assessment tools where when students are watching the videos, they're answering questions. And when they come to class the next day, the teacher knows what standards to really target and what they're having difficulties with. We're implementing choice boards and menus. We also have the multi-tiered systems of support that we're implementing this year as well, which is to help students' individual interventions. We're building our relationships using SEL lessons. We have small group instruction and individualized instruction in the afternoons with Google Meet sessions. And then we're also implementing the after-school help programs that assist students who are struggling in English and math. And that's it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Melissa?
I do, but I
Yes,
imagine Dan.
I have a question. I have a couple.
Okay.
Okay, let's first, the percentiles, are they state or national?
They're national percentiles. 10 million students took the MAPS test, and that's what they're comparing it to, a national level.
Okay, so even though we're above 50%, some of them weren't that great above.
Well,
Gail, you're not coming through. I can't hear you. Melissa, can you hear?
oh, I can't. I can't.
I don't think she can hear you either.
Gail. Gail, we can't hear you.
Hear me?
Oh, there you
I
go.
can't hear anybody.
Go ahead.
I can't hear anybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I can't, all right. All right, I forget where I left off. Okay. Okay, so Melissa, when you were showing the math, there were several grade levels. Can you go to that math slide? In the beginning, I had a question about it. Now, without seeing it, it's hard to ask the question.
Okay. This one or the one before it?
One before it.
Okay.
All right, we were looking at, okay. Okay, it must have been where I was picking up on the percentiles. Okay, so even though the growth went up nationally, our 4th and 6th grade were to me a little bit too close to 50. The question I had, in the grade levels that did not do as well, did they do as, what were they the year before? Sean probably could answer it better. Remember, Sean, there were certain grade levels that were having trouble? Are those same grade levels? Are they?
Lauren and I discussed that today, and they are the same grade levels that was having the previous trouble as well. Yes.
Okay, so they're the ones that were already having problems.
But they're on the good part, they're all growing. The RIT scores are growing. They're showing growth.
Okay. All right, that was my concern. It was the ones that last year, there were a couple of them that were really struggling. And when you looked at them from 2018, they were struggling. And now, because of COVID, where you had the slide, I wondered how bad they were struggling.
So I know Sean told me that last year, the first grade, which is now the second grade, and when you look at the reading scores, it does make sense because they were struggling last year.
I remember yes. Okay. And then I knew there were, was it 7th or 6th grade? I can't remember. Maybe it was last year 7th.
It was last year's 7th.
Year 7th, this year's 8th.
Correct. They were
Okay,
the other.
when you-
There was the other targeted area.
Yeah, because when you look at them, they had growth, but I mean, they're below 50% in math. I mean, they're really
But
bad.
just
Yeah.
say, this is a national concern, mathematics. I was a previous math teacher and math specialist in my old district, and mathematics has been a concern. We're actually ranked 32nd in the world on mathematics as a country.
Okay, but I think our 8th grade, I think is 7th graders, they struggled in math. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, but Melissa, if this is a comparison against national averages, that's US averages.
Yes.
So the fact that the US in general is slipping worldwide is inconsequential to the fact that our scores are low nationally. You got to have an apples to apples comparison,
Right.
right?
Yeah. But we're,
So in the case of what I'm looking at, I have some of the similar questions, and I'd be open to your interpretation of it. Looking at the percentiles for math, looking at what we're seeing in the percentile ranking in 2020 compared to 2019, and as I look as the kids get older, the percentile rankings are slipping in general.
yes.
So we're doing really well with the young kids and where they're placing against the cohort nationally. But as the kids get older, we're not. Now, I didn't see the same thing happening in the language. We seem to be much more evenly distributed. But in the case of math, we've seen this. I don't see any real change, and I'm not being critical of you in any stretch, but for years we have seen this trend happening, and I don't see that we're not having any impact in addressing it currently.
And the 8th grade concerns me because if you look at them, in 2019, they were 7th graders.
But we have to remember too, just take into account what's going on right now with the pandemic.
Oh, no, I understand.
But the
that.
pandemic isn't local to us, it's national. Therefore, it doesn't matter.
Right. When you're looking at
And
the
our
8th
reading
grade,
scores weren't affected by that.
we're including the algebra, students in algebra included in that 8th grade, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's just concerning because I think last year's, it's just concerning when you look at 8th grade. And I think last year's 8th grade may have been low. We were kind of hoping that this year's 8th grade wouldn't follow the track that last year's 8th grade did.
But if you look at the growth, they are growing, the percentiles.
They are growing, but
improving. So that's what we're
Sure.
looking at. We are
yeah,
improving.
no, they are, well, they are growing. Okay.
Well, that's arguable. You're still well within the standard deviation of what's being reported here. I mean, it's just to me a 36 and a 39, it's the same number when you have a standard deviation of 12.
Yeah.
It's not that differentiated. And I get it. We're all in a pandemic, and that has to be stripped away because the kids we're being compared to are also in a pandemic.
And that's why we are doing things such as the flipped classroom. We're using Edpuzzle. We're doing the multi-tiered system of supports. We are doing interventions. We're working with guidance, CST, and the teachers on a daily basis to help target our learners' needs.
Yeah. Again, I'm not coming at you, Melissa, by any stretch. You're just the one presenting the data, and I feel for you. This is tough data to present, but we need to think about this in the context of our curriculum and what we're doing with some of the higher grades.
Okay, Melissa, do you know what specific areas of mathematics 8th grades having problems with?
I did not dig deep into that data yet. That's
Okay,
something
so we don't know whether it's computation or problem solving. Okay,
But I can tell you, Gil, and I can speak to that one. If you recall, last year, we were able to get a very large report from math.
yes.
Was able to get data analysis. We did not have the spring administration.
Right.
We could not get that report this year. So we've already talked to them to try to make sure we can get it again, because that was such a great tool to understand clearly because that broke it down more towards a standards-based level than what this does when we're looking at it this way. So although we can see some individual areas and certain things, that report that we were able to use was fantastic for us to really drill down this data to understand the areas we needed to improve in our curriculum. And don't forget too, in addition to what Melissa said, this year, we've also implemented our new reading program, K6, and our new math program as well, the newer updated version of Envisions. So there are certain things that we're addressing in terms of the resources plus the new curriculums as well that we're using. So hopefully that these issues, I know Dan, you were going back before in terms of the historical perspective of this. There are a lot of things we put in place now to identify them, especially, and I don't want to overemphasize the importance of this, The multi-tiered system support Melissa was talking about is an enormous tool for us to find early identification of student struggles and create individualized supports for those students. So there's really are a lot of things we're trying to do to address them. But unfortunately, going back to the perspective, and I know Steve, you
Tommy's here.
these students were some of the same ones we saw struggling last year. You know, when you're looking at it, it's hard to undo some of these slides that were occurring previously in such a short period of time. But I think we're putting a lot of things in place to hopefully not have ourselves in that same position moving forward.
Yeah, I get that, Sean. We're measuring and reporting out on last year's achievements in a way, and the supports that are now in place with the new curriculum and the new math support.
Yep.
I'm hoping, right? I mean, the plan is we've done this so that next year, the line 7, the line 8, the line 6 data is going to change on a percentile basis, hopefully in the
Absolutely.
right direction.
That's the hope.
Yep.
But Sean, last year when you presented this data to us, the plan was to implement a lot of different things that were going to bring math up and reading. I mean, obviously the reading is doing a lot better than I think what happened last year. But do you feel that you and the staff have and the teachers have a good bead on what you've implemented that's been effective, what stuff's not effective,
Well,
where
sorry,
you
Steve,
need to
you're
go
breaking up
as we
there.
get into next year?
Steve, I'm sorry, you glitched when you said something about effective. I missed the last part of it. I apologize.
I always glitch. No, just do you feel that you have the right data to know what's effective and what's not effective to take the curriculum for next year?
I think that's one of the hardest parts, Steve, is, in a normal year when we're doing this presentation, we'd also be talking about NJSLA data. We don't have that data right now. We don't have that testing data. We have this data. We don't even have the spring data. So we're looking fall to fall, but there's so many things that happen in between for us to really look at that growth. So the hardest part about this is it is kind of incomplete in many ways. In fact, when we had this conversation last year, we were talking about all these things we're going to put in place. And then, the school shut down a few months later and we had to try to transition. So I think there's a lot of things that have perhaps put us, let's call it, decelerated our ability to implement some of the things we're wanting to. And we're hoping that we're getting caught up on that now with a lot of the newer things we put in place this year. And are continuing to start, like Melissa mentioned, the after school help program. That's something that is being board approved tonight. But the people for that are on the agenda. So there's a lot of things we're still looking as the years we're going and having those meetings and looking at the data points that we're getting almost on a daily basis to find out what other things we need to implement to help our students.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Melissa, could you go to the reading slide?
This one? Or the next
Yes, thank you. That one. So, and thank you very much for going through all this. I appreciate all the detail that you're giving us. But for that second grade category there, I know you mentioned there were a couple of factors that you were thinking contributed to the slide and percentile there. Are they things that are unique to second grade or more outsized in that second grade class that aren't?
I'm sorry. It's typical. When I was looking at a lot of the research for MAPS and I was looking for a lot of the research for the COVID slide at the younger grade levels, especially in first grade going to second grade, there's a lot of basic foundations for reading skills. And at the lower levels in reading, first, second, and third grade, they did see it being impacted with the COVID and summer slide.
Okay, so we kind of lucked out with the kids in first grade and third grade, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Melissa, when will parents be receiving their individual child's MAP scores?
At parent-teacher conferences.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible, or is there a way to provide them in advance so that way there could be a more productive discussion on the MAP scores as part of the conference?
We can talk to the teachers. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about myself as a parent. If I was handed that in the midst of a 10-minute conference, I don't know how much time that would afford me to review it, understand it, ask questions, and still talk about what my child's doing in class. Right. And the other point is the conferences will be virtual. So if you're going to deliver them during the conference, how will you be doing that?
Deliver the MAPS scores. I think that's on a teacher individual, how they present it to the parents.
But if it's a virtual conference,
they can share their screen and their data,
Yes.
MAP scores.
Okay. I would hope you'd have a conversation about providing them ahead of time.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because when teachers usually present it to you, they hand you a paper copy, you walked out the door and you could dissect it and you could email them back with questions. If you show it on the screen, then that's, electronically, sharing electronically would be favorable if possible.
Any other questions for Melissa? All right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Okay, moving on, we'll go to the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion for the regular meeting of October 19th?
So moved,
So
Kevin.
moved. Second, Judy.
Any questions or comments?
There's an adjustment to be made for Dr. Jones's vote on the sidebar agreement. It will be vote recorded as an abstention. I recorded it incorrectly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, roll call.
Mrs. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Dilks,
Yes.
Colonel Hensky.
I'll abstain.
I'll get that right, I promise. Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. McCloy,
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain.
Yes. Can I
Thank
have a
you.
motion? Can I have a motion for the executive session of October 19th?
So moved, Vicky.
Second,
Kevin.
Judy.
Who was that?
Kevin.
Judy.
Kevin said it first.
Okay.
He did not.
He did too. He did too. Thumb Russell after the meeting. Questions or comments? Seeing none. Patty?
Mrs. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Dilks,
Yes.
Colonel Hensky,
I'll abstain.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. McCloy,
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor,
Yes.
and Mrs. Chamberlain.
Yes.
Thank you.
Committee of the whole work session, November 2nd. Can I get a motion?
This is Dan. I'll take it.
Second, Gail.
Any questions or comments? Patty, you're up.
Mrs. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Dilks,
Yes.
Colonel Hensky,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. McCloy,
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent's report. Sean?
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we do have our parent-teacher conferences. They will begin Thursday with our nighttime sessions, followed by additional conferences in the afternoon on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. Also, we will have our Green Day / remote days. They'll begin on Friday, and they will run through Wednesday, November 25th for Thanksgiving. We also, just a quick reminder to all our families, we are currently participating in our Blue versus Gold food drive. As it stands right now, it's a pretty even heat, so please make sure that you can contribute to that. Again, I'm trying to see which cohort will bring in the most, and I'm very impressed so far with what we've had, and I was very taken back as Blue was very much in the lead until today, and I think it's pretty even on that front right now. Also, as Melissa had indicated in her presentation, and you're going to see later on the board agenda tonight, we are going to start having afternoon supports for ELA and for math. Those supports are scheduled to begin on December 1st. Letter will be going home probably tomorrow about this. We are looking at having our K and 2 supports. So we run on those days from 3:45 to 4:15. Our 3, 4, and 5 will be 4:15 to 4:45. 6, 7, 8 will be 2:45 to 3:45. And one other quick thing is every month right now, the state is giving us a heads up as to what type of drill they'd like us to run for our security drill. This month's drill will be a notification drill. It's a different type of thing we've done in the past. And really what it's done is the state's trying to make sure that all schools have proper notification in case of emergency in terms of phone, email, and text in our systems. So we'll be sending home a letter to let all families know that we'll be doing our notification drill. As it stands right now, we're looking to have it on November 18th at 4 p.m. We'll be having the letter going home tomorrow or blasted out. And again, if you get this or don't get the notification when it actually happens, we just ask that obviously you'd want to update everything on the parent portal. It's very vital, obviously, that we have the correct contact information in there. And that's why the state has this month's chosen drill being reflected this way.
Okay.
And that's it.
Anything else? All right, moving right along. Go to reports, liaison reports, School Boards Association, Mrs. Corey.
Okay, the delegate assembly is this Saturday. It'll be virtual. There is just one resolution to vote on. They did not send me the complete resolution yet, but they did give me the summary. So I'm going to read you the summary, and then I just need you to let me know how to vote. The resolution seeks to propose new policy language supporting the requirement that a board member with a term of office extending beyond the next election must resign the seat currently held before submitting a nominating petition to stand as a candidate for a seat different than the seat currently held by the member. That make sense?
All right, say that again. Who's got to
Right.
resign when?
A board member with a term of office extending beyond the next election must resign the seat currently held before submitting a nominating petition to stand as a candidate for a seat different than the seat they currently hold.
I think that has to do when someone fills in an unfinished term.
So
Don't we
for
have
the-
to do that anyhow?
Could be what it sounds like.
It sounds like it's, if you're in an unfinished term but want to run, you have to resign from the seat that you're in, the unfinished term, to run for the open one of the 3 seats? Is that what that is?
See, I interpret it as if I was filling in Vicky's seat and then my term was ending, but Megan's seat became available, I'd have to resign the seat I'm filling in so I can now put a petition in to fill Megan's seat. That make sense? That's how I interpret it.
Yeah. Judy Saylor, can you answer this question? Did you have to, you filled in a seat. Did you have to fill out paperwork at the end of that year to continue in that seat?
No, so when Mr. Price left, I interviewed and was selected as the person for that seat. At the end of his term, which was that 1 year, I had to run for office again. There was no documentation or anything to do with it.
Okay.
Yeah, but if your term had gone for an extra year, you'd have to resign in order to run, is what I think you're saying. If Patty's,
So it's-
in which this
That's
is the
what it
one time we
sounds
need
like.
Brian.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're talking about the scenario where you fill in for someone who has, let's say, 2 years left. And at the end of that term, that first year, instead of filling out that or applying for 1 year, you want to go after the 3-year spot?
It doesn't, I don't understand what,
I'm
I think
assuming.
we need an attorney to review it.
This,
I don't
this
know
is
how
all
to
they
answer
sent
it.
me.
Yeah,
want me to read it
Gail,
again?
when is this due back?
We
Saturday.
vote this Saturday,
Can you,
and
can
this
you
is all they
send,
sent me.
can you send around or have one of the admins send around the exact wording so we can consider it? And do we have to vote on this tonight or
Well,
can?
now, okay, Kevin has to, all right, Kevin, this comes down to them, me asking them to vote and then sending the vote back to me. So Kevin, you want to explain? Where's Kevin?
I mean, we
McCoy?
can't vote over email,
Right.
so
Right.
that's not an option.
You don't when I did DA, we were told, John Bellina told me, because he was there that year when I did DA. And I got sent in and the board at the time gave me no instructions and didn't comment on any of the resolutions. And he said, you had to vote your conscience. So I don't know if the board has to vote. I think at the end of the day, it's Gail's kind of decision.
Thank you.
vote your conscience.
That's kind of where John Bellina let me when he was sitting as an officer and I was the tabernacle representative to DA?
I personally am not in that position, so I don't have a problem with voting yes. I don't know if anybody was in that position, if that would bother you, that you would then have to resign your seat before you submit a petition to run for board.
The only thing
I think you, go ahead, Becky.
what I'm thinking is technically you were not elected. You were not elected
You were
by
appointed.
the community. You were
Right.
just
And
appointed.
I, myself, Gail, and Meg were all interviewed at that point for Mr. Price's position because we
Right.
chose to run for that.
Mhm.
And it was Dr. Shari, and I believe you were there, Mrs. Shoemaker,
Yeah.
and 2 other administrators were there. And, you know, it was like a 5-man interview that we went through.
Yeah, but you technically weren't elected.
No,
You
I
were
was not,
appointed.
and I only finished out his 1 year. I had to
Right.
choose to run
then-
or not at
But
the
there
end of
has
his year.
been,
This resolution is coming from Bergen County, and they might be having a problem, which is why they're bringing forth this resolution. Because I remember when,
Yeah, they're trying to get rid of people who aren't working.
yeah,
when you,
I mean, Gail, can you see how the discussion goes at the delegate assembly and kind of make a decision there? And I mean, worst
Sure.
case, if you don't have a strong feel either way, could you abstain from that vote even?
yes,
yeah, I think that's the best thing is to hear the
Okay.
whole thing and understand it better.
Right.
I'd be in favor of what Kevin suggested.
Yeah.
all right.
Can we vote on that?
We technically have to.
Bad, Gail. All right, anything else for the SBA, New Jersey SBA?
That's it.
Okay, Ms. Shoemaker, do you have anything for the Burlington County SBA?
The next meeting is Thursday, December 3rd. I don't know what the topic is. If you're interested in going, you can check it
I
out
think,
on the
I think
website.
it's on ethnicity.
Is it? I wasn't sure. I looked back at my notes, but I couldn't find anything.
Because I remember I was looking, when I was checking, trying to get the resolution for Saturday, it came up to register for a December 3rd meeting, and I think it said ethnicity.
Okay.
Okay. For the Home and School Association, there
That
was
would
a
be
meeting. That'd be me. I took it this time. On November 11th, there was a meeting. The virtual Halloween parties were a big success. There was a pumpkin contest where there was over 70 entries, and there were 8 winners that received gift cards to Barnes and Nobles. There was a LuLaRoe fundraiser that raised $1,075, and an Upper Crust Dine and Donate that raised over $200. They'll look to do another Dine and Donate after the holidays. The elementary school yearbook is in the works. There was a very generous anonymous donation of $5,000 that will be used for a specific purpose for the kids. There'll be discussions after the holidays, I'm sure, how to spend it. There's the Save Around books that they're still selling. They're all online. It's the South Jersey edition. From the Save Around books, we get 50% of the profits. They're doing the Boone sale. If anybody's ever heard of Boone, it's gift wrap and gifts and kitchen gadgets. It's pretty cool. Bags, I think, are in there. The information is on the HSA website. We receive 40% of those sales, and that's running now through December 31st. The holiday shop will not be in person this year, but it will be done all online. Information will be coming out for the Christmas shop. There'll be a Panzerotti sale in January where they'll have the pickup the Friday before the Super Bowl. So no cooking for the Super Bowl. The November clothing drive that is usually done, it was already booked, so they're on a list for either January, maybe December. Apparently, there's a long list for the clothing drive. The Scholastic Book Fair will be completely online, possibly in February. And the bingo update, still trying for the bingo that was canceled last spring. If you purchased a ticket and you would request would like a refund, you can always request a refund. They're still looking to try to do a raffle in the spring, where they would sell the tickets for the same price as the tickets you already paid, and then they would raffle off the bags. There's always Amazon Smile and box tops. There's no meeting in December. The next one is January 14th.
Meg, I just have one comment. I had seen on Facebook something about the save the books, the saving
Right, the
books.
save around. Yep.
At one point, I saw that they were listed as $25, and in another one, I saw they were listed as $12.50.
Okay, so the books I know were $25, and of that $25, the
Right.
HSA gets the $12.50.
So you might want to have whoever's putting them out check and be sure, because I saw it with two different prices.
Okay. I saw Amy on here earlier. Hopefully she's still on here someplace. If not, I'll make sure I bring it up to her tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks. That's it for HSA. The Ed Foundation. Colonel Hensky, anything?
Nothing to report.
Okay, in that case, moving on to Flash. I did attend the Flash meeting this month, 10/27. So they sent home a survey and there were some responses. Most of the information was for home support. They're working on getting reminders out on the app, the Remind app. They're trying a bunch of different ways to reach parents. They're using emails and tiger paw prints to see which ones are going to work the best for getting information out. They're looking into doing a virtual learning resources, like a doc file that's shared, so that if you find or come across information that's working for your child, you can upload it to this file so that everybody can share with it. Right now, the advice they're using is like Alexa as a reminder or any kind of an alarm for on any device. There's Google Read and Write on Chromebooks using talk and text with iPads and closed captions. They're working on Google Chats with resources to build upon. They're always working on how to get more people to show up for the meetings. Though they talked about doing newsletters or Winklet. I don't know what that is. If you go to the district offices tab on the website and the drop down is special services, they have updated a lot of information on there. There's the meeting announcements, there's newsletters, there's videos to watch. I did look at it. It's all brand new. It's very interesting stuff. Please look into it. The next meeting is December 1st, and there's going to be a speaker. So please look into the website, though. There's a lot of new information on there for everybody. All right. Do we have anything for School Wellness Committee? Mr. Dilts?
We do not. I do have a question, though. I'm wondering who's currently leading School Wellness Committee?
We're in the process, Dan, of reorganizing and getting a committee together for December.
Okay, so we should plan on a December meeting?
Yes, we're talking about now.
Okay.
More information will come. We'll make sure you're included.
All right, yeah, because it's going to say it seems like a long time since we've had a meeting or I've had a report to give. So,
yep,
especially in light of what we're all going through, I would think school wellness should be a meeting that happens.
It'll come in December. No problem. We'll make sure you're included.
Okay. Anything for Township Council, Dr. Jones?
Nothing to report.
have you reached out to them? Have they reached out to you? Has there been any?
Last time I touched base with them, I spoke to the mayor and she had assigned a member of the township committee to reach out to us, and that member has not followed through.
Do we know who that member is? Maybe we can reach out to them.
I can try.
Okay. Alrighty, public comments on agenda items at this time. Please limit it to 3 minutes. Sorry, I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me. Do we have any questions or comments on the agenda items only right now? Do we have any hands?
There are no hands.
No hands, okay. All right, under the recommendation of the superintendent for education, we have 1 through 4. Can I get a motion?
So moved, Vicky.
Second, Kevin.
Kevin, any questions or comments?
I have a question about the number 4, the resolution, the self-assessment for the HIB reports, the HIB grade system. I just was curious about the score. Is there I know the total score is 78. Is there a passing grade or an acceptable number?
That's well within passing, Vicky. It goes based on, there's a set rubric the state actually gives you for each individual element that we sit down with our anti-bullying coordinators to go over every single, or the anti-bullying specialist, I should say, to look at everything that's done in the school and the activities that have been done and been assessed. So it's really, they don't really, I think it's very difficult, if you're being honest, to score a perfect score, because there's always certain things that you can say, you know what, we can do better in. And we tried being as honest as we could. So that's, our score is definitely well within passing.
Okay, I was just curious.
Totally understandable.
Sean, I had one as well. I mean, I certainly understand why, for example, having 2 meetings not last year might have been problematic in person, but I was kind of curious as to on the indicators of the official grades being on the school website.
Yes. So what actually happens on that one, that's a weird one.
Okay.
We realized to get to the 3 on that category, you have to have a further explanation of what those grades mean than we had previously been giving.
Okay, so that's something that you guys have already identified,
Yeah,
and
we had a whole
that's a
conversation
fix
about it.
for this year. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of those things, again, that they have certain additional hoops, I guess you have to jump through, so to speak, to get the 3s. That was one of those areas.
Okay, that was when I was like, wait, why didn't we get 3 there? Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
I lose you on the screen. Everything keeps moving around. Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thanks.
Oops. Did that work? I think so. All right, under personnel, 1 through 4. Can I get a motion?
So moved, Vicky.
Second, Gail.
Questions or comments?
I have some.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yep. For the number 1, the after school help program, what time will that be run? What days and what times?
Sean, you're muted.
Thanks, Meg. So it'll be on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. On Tuesdays, it'll be math support. Wednesdays will be ELA support. It'll run, we broke down the students based on grade groupings. So K to 2, so saying before, that'll be from 3:45 to 4:15, 3 to 5. It'll be 4:15 to 4:45, and 6, 7, 8 will be 2:45 to 3:45.
Okay.
And we had the teachers, the way that you see so many of them on there is Melissa did a fantastic job of creating a calendar for backups, because one of our big concerns is, especially in this year, is you never know what can happen with people getting sick. And we were trying to make sure we never had a position where we had to cancel the day help for the students,
Right.
which is such a beneficial thing. So we included this many, not that they'll all be working on a given day, but that there's always a backup for the person assigned.
Yeah, you've got the redundancy built in. That's great. I'm guessing you have this on a sticky note on your desk.
Actually, Melissa did a huge calendar that she made for at least for the next month.
Yeah.
And again, there'll be, like I said, a letter that's gonna be going home to make sure
Okay.
that people know how to join this as well.
This will be fully remote support, yes?
That is correct.
And is it one-on-one or small group?
It could be small group. It could be one-on-one, depending on how many students join during a given session.
Okay, so it's a session and then it's open for the students to sign up to attend that session.
Students, they'll be the class page, the Google page they'll have with the links will be shared out as part of Melissa's letter home. And then students can join in, or, teachers can also recommend, or, things like that. But that opportunity will be available for those students during that time.
It's open to all students.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Patty?
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thanks.
Under financial, we have 1 through 12.
So moved, Kevin.
Second, Vicky.
Thanks, guys. Vicky and Kevin. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call.
I have
Oh.
I'm sorry. I was a little bit late. I was on mute.
Sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
Number 12.
Yep.
I just noted that for A, it represents 24% of salary, and B, it represents 25% of salary. Is that a
Mhm.
typo, or is that correct?
No, it's just it's the way the percentage went all the way out. And
Okay,
it's a rounding. Mhm.
got it. Because the numerical value is identical, so I was
Yeah.
just, yep,
Yeah.
caught my eye. Thank you.
Yeah, but their base salary might not be.
Mhm.
Understood. That's how it's interpreted now that I know that those numbers are right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Patty?
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes. Okay, under policy. So number 1 is a readoption of a policy that we'll have to vote on, a roll call vote. So can we do number 1 and do a roll call, and then we'll do number 2 for the first reading? Yes? Am I
Make
doing
a
this right?
motion? Yes, we can do.
Okay. Okay, so number 1, can I get a motion?
So moved, Vicky.
Second?
Second,
Anybody?
Judy.
Judy? Any questions or comments about number 1, policy and regulation 5600? Seeing none, can we do a roll call?
Mrs. Corey? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And then under policy 2 for the first reading.
So moved, Kevin.
Second, Megan.
Okay. Comments or questions?
Just
I-
one, Pat.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
go ahead.
Kevin. No, go ahead.
Patty, you went through and you figured out we did need some of those policies that we weren't sure about. I take
Yes.
it based on seeing them here. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Roll call?
I have a
Oh,
couple
We
questions.
don't. Oh.
Sorry.
Dan, you're killing me.
Sorry, I let Kevin go first
You-
this time.
Well, you're not on the same screen with everybody else either. I'm
I
like,
don't know why that is. I'm looking at me.
You're looking at you? All right.
I'm just looking for clarification. So Kevin, I don't know if you can tell me, or if this would be to Sean, and I'm not even 100% sure where I've seen this, but under the restart and recovery plan, or the remote learning options for families, or the restart and recovery full-time remote instruction plan, what's the interpretation there in terms of a student being out sick on a day when they are scheduled to be in person?
They are considered absent.
But if they log in from home and
Still
attend
absent.
classes,
It's because, remember, that goes down to the idea of what learning model that child is currently in.
right?
So if a student is listed as an in-person learner,
right,
their attendance can only be present if they're supposed to be on that day. Understand? If they're actually in person on that day, based on the model we have.
As I recall, the intention was to keep kids who are not to be present on a given day from not coming in on the day they weren't supposed to be there. But it was not reciprocal the other way. And the reason why this is important is when we laid this out, the intention was to model this after what the high school would be doing and to model it after what local districts would be doing.
And the one thing, Dan, is what we're doing on there is I think there's a difference in terms of thinking of attendance as being a punitive measure. So although a student may be listed as attendance for our record keeping purposes, that's not a punitive thing counted against the student. And if it became a student who ever achieved chronic absenteeism because of the sickness type of situation like this, that'd be something that we had full documentation behind. There would be no penalty to the family because of that situation.
That's not even the nature of why I'm asking. I'm asking because at the high school level, if a student is to be in school, but they're home because they're sick or they have a dentist appointment and they don't go in that day, they can log in remotely and they are counted as being present for the day. So we're not in alignment with the high school.
Dan, but that, speaking of someone who's in that school district,
right?
For starters, families can change whether or not they are virtual or in-person learners on basically a 24 to 48 hour notice. If a student has a doctor's or dentist appointment, they have to still check out and notify technically the attendance clerk that they have left school and will not be in school because of that portion of the day. And if they don't get the required hours, then that also does not count for a day. So our model does not align. Like Lenape did something completely different to almost anyone else I've seen. So it doesn't align to theirs. It's not this. We're not comparing apples and apples here.
Yeah, I think if a student is not in the building because they're homesick, but they're well enough to log in and learn, then the credit should be given for being present and learning on that day.
To that end, Dan, then what stops a parent to say, I'm going on vacation, I want my child to be marked present for that vacation? Why is it?
Would they be logged in and learning the whole day as they're supposed to be when they're on vacation?
We've had that come up too, and for the same thing we talked
I
about,
mean,
that was going back to our initial conversations where we said, and going back to our reviewing of this policy, where we wanted to set guidelines so that people weren't just pinging and ponging back and forth to different cohorts to make sure we were properly, accurately tracking things. It's not as a punitive measure, but we have to make sure that we're tracking this in a proper way. And I think if we're saying, and again, it's not held against the student. If they're being homesick, we are encouraging them to still participate in those additional things, but it helps us to track what's actually happening with our students.
Can you refer to me to where in the policy it does talk about then the absentee policy?
Our general absentee policy is still legally has to be followed by a school district. What's actually happening here is in our plan where we talked about in terms of remote learning options for families. And in the other plan, we talked about the set guidelines and time for students and parents to say if I'm going to be learning from a remote model versus the hybrid model.
Sean, does that also have to do with the state attendance requirements? When you're doing the attendance, you're recording how many students are in the building that day. So when that child, they're not in the building and that's what you're recording, they're absent from the building. They're not in that day.
But Gail,
and you need that for your overall attendance records.
Gail, on the days those students or that cohort of students are hybrid, they're remote, they're still recorded as being present. They're still having that morning check-in and getting credit for being, quote, in school, but it's happening remotely.
Actually,
But
they're
you're
being
saying that's
listed.
not being held against them. They're just not in the records that they're in the building that day.
Our attendance actually has changed entirely this year from the state of New Jersey, where students are there marked as being present in person or present or absent in person, rather present or absent remote. So if a student is listed as being an in-person learning environment student or a hybrid student on the days that the student is supposed to be physically present in the building, if they're not physically present, we are reflecting that by calling them absent in person. Just as a student who is on a hybrid day where they're learning remotely, or a fully virtual student, if they're not checking in as may be, they're then listed as present or absent remotely. That is the state's guidelines that we are trying to make sure that we're there. It's not to, again, penalize a student. Our goal is to make sure that our records to the state are as accurate as possible in reflecting what is happening based on the intention behind it. And again, as I've had conversations with parents, this is not to penalize any sort of students. If a kid came up and said, hey, I'm sick, I stayed home, we'll work it out with you. That's not it. But we're trying to make sure our actual records of students, if they're where they're supposed to be in the individual learning models, is accurate. It's not a penalty thing. I think people get this idea in their heads that attendance can be a penalty. And again, it can be if you're saying that in a normal situation, somebody is being excessively absent and not coming to school and things like that. The situations that we've talked with parents, it's not that this year, but we're trying to make sure our records are accurately reporting what is happening. And again, I know that some other districts are enabling people to choose every other day which model they're learning in, but that has not been the decision that we've had. And in fact, and a part of it as well would only exacerbate things if people were changing from day to day if they're learning in person, hybrid, remote, because we would have no idea from transportation purposes or even for school purposes in terms of the classroom environment as to who to expect on a given day coming back that way. It works both sides.
One last comment about this though is that if you have that in place, I can't help but think that one of the reasons the high school put this in place was to encourage kids who aren't feeling well to stay home, right? As part of maintaining a healthy learning environment for their classmates.
And we encourage that as well. But I can tell you one of the things that has happened at the high school at times is they've had a large number of students who are choosing on a given day to not come to school for whatever reason. In some way, it actually encourages them to stay home. Because if I can just stay home all the time and stay in my bed, if I don't feel up to it, then why come to school? And we're actually trying to encourage them again by having our building in a hybrid environment to encourage as many students that are supposed to be in our building to be in our building on a given day. I think it actually, yeah, I understand entirely what you're saying in terms of the real legitimate people who are sick, and we've worked it out with them, but we also want the people who just don't feel like it on a given day. They're still supposed to come to school. And I've been very clear on any parent I've talked to that this is not something to penalize them, and there will be no penalty for the parents I've spoken to for the children that they've clearly told this child is staying home for that.
Can you point me to where I would have read then about the attendance policy under a hybrid program? Where would that be listed?
I'm not clear off the top of my head, Dan, where that was specifically in the policies.
But it would have been addressed in one of the three I mentioned, right?
Where it talked about the learning environment and identifying the learning environment and so on, and also encouraging that we did have in there that students and staff are recommended or required to stay home when they're sick. But that's why we're saying there's not a penalty. This is not a perfect attendance type of situation. It's if you're sick, stay home. It's the same thing we've said again. Like I said, it's not just with the students, it's the staff as well. We don't want to bring this into our building.
My point is, I don't think we've addressed it under the term attendance, and that's actually what's being discussed here for record keeping purposes. We've addressed it from a health standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of the group that worked on that part of the policy, and we broke it out in terms of how to address it with students and then how to address it with staff, and what signs and process would happen if a student came in and presented with illness, or if a staff member came in and presented with illness. But I don't think we have addressed the attendance portion of that.
So does your desire to have us have a parent have the ability to call in on any given day and have their child be marked as present if they are not in physical school when they're supposed to be?
If the goal that we had talked about before was to be aligned as closely as possible to the high school, that's something we should probably talk about. If the child is not in school on a day they're supposed to be in school, but they are able to log in remotely and participate remotely for the full day and put their time in, I think it's worth talking about. I'm
But
not
Dan,
looking to have them come in on a day that's not their affixed, prescribed day to be in class.
Dan, from the other side, though, that also contradicts how we discussed previously to Sean's point about if people were going on vacation, we didn't want to have that window open for them to switch back and forth. And we did, that was part of the specific reason I think that we took this route, was so people were not switching back and forth so that when they were going on vacation, because that does impact the kids that are in hybrid that are virtual that day, because then there's more kids in virtual that day that were previously hadn't been. So it does impact the division of the kids too. So there's a larger burden and a larger number of people in that day on whatever model it may be, whether it's hybrid or in person.
Gail, you're muted.
Okay. What Sean is saying is they're just marking the child not present for in-person learning. He's not saying they're not learning. They're just not present for in-person learning. They're getting credit for the day if they log on remotely because they're homesick, but they're not present for the in-person learning.
How are
You
they
have to make
getting
that distinction?
How are they
No,
getting
they're not
credit
getting
for the
credit.
day though, Meg? Or Gail, I don't understand.
They're
getting
not being
credit for every
penalized for being
work they
absent
do, is
from
what she's
school.
saying. There's no penalty behind absence is what Gail is trying to say. They're getting credit in terms of the work they're doing, if I'm understanding what Gail is trying to say.
Steve,
Right,
did
but
you
Gail's
have?
also saying that they get to at least academically be involved, and that's not the case. They can make up their schoolwork as if they're sick because they're not in that cohort. Their cohort's at school. And I know because I lived through this when Joe got sick and he sat in his school and he waited for his teachers to email him his stuff because he wasn't in his friends were in school. So I think to Dan's point is, how do we encourage parents, especially as this thing ramps up in the next few months, to continue to keep their children home under abundance of caution and still not feel like they're causing their child that, to be penalized in some form or fashion?
I can tell you when the parents that I've talked to, Steve, have worked out with them, notify their teachers and try to make sure they can join the afternoon Google Meets, that they can end up doing the work that is assigned for the hybrid group on those days. And any day that they were supposed to be there, we've been trying to work it out with them all. It really has not, when I've looked at our attendance issues, we have had, again, and from talking to the parents, I know there's been a few issues where people have not understood this part of the policy, but for the most part, okay, my kid will continue doing the work if they feel well enough. So again, we have not, knock on wood, I think we've done a very good job of communicating our policies, of communicating the desire to have people that are not healthy stay in. Again, going back to the communications we've had on a very frequent basis in response to the daily health screenings that people are doing in the morning and the conversations that have led to those dialogues if they hit no on any of those things. And I think we are doing a good job of having people understand the need to keep kids home when they are not feeling well. And again, the communication I've had with them when it's coming to me directly is that we are not looking this as a punitive measure, as it's a tracking tool. The kid can still continue to do something. And again, that's how they're reviewing it right now. We're trying to be as accurate as we can with our actual attendance reports.
Yeah,
This also comes back to the conversations I've had with on a larger level from the state, where there were issues at times where, due in remote learning, there were issues across the state in terms of accurately reflecting in what was actually happening with attendance, who was present, who was not. And we are doing our absolute due diligence and making sure that all of our records this year are completely accurate on reporting of who is and who's not in the building on the days they're supposed to be.
Sean, you mentioned the daily health screening. Can you, I know you made some changes to that. Can you kind of highlight just briefly what the process is now if a health screening is not submitted for a student attending in person?
Yes, Mr. McKean, in terms of his supervisory role over top the nurses, has talked a lot about with them of times and putting in certain time frames of making sure that everything is happening in terms of our screenings in a much earlier fashion, making this a different priority. And also, we've also had a staff member assigned to call families if they're not doing the screenings as well. I think our numbers have continued to decrease the numbers of people that are not compliant. We have not gone to the extent that I know other school districts have actually sending people directly home if you're not doing this the second time and things like that. But I think we've been very diligent in keeping up on this and making sure that those that are supposed to are doing it and going from there.
What is the target time to have the child screened in school if they show up without a form?
I think for the most part, our first cohort of students that arrive, which is the 6, 7, and 8 students, on most days, they've been able to get done before the next group of students arrive, which would be on, before 8:45 is our next group. Most days now, all students are screened prior to that arrival time, and the next group is done with the next 45 minutes after arrival as well.
So within 45 minutes of arrival.
That's pretty much what's being done now, yes. We've
Okay.
really tightened up, and also, like I said, additional notifications. And then looking in terms of the number of people that are submitting them on a day-to-day basis, it has greatly improved since we've done that, plus the additional reminder in the mornings as well. And like I said, we still continue to have every few days get that phone call from someone that says, hey, I did that screening, something came up, what's my next step? So what do I need to do? It's that constant reminder to people that's actually, I think, helping to make sure that we're not in the situation of having a larger shutdown in our schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I forget where we're at now.
Sorry,
We
Mike.
were finished
Vote on
up
the floor.
policy, right? Those were the questions on policy,
So we're on number 2, which would be the first reading of all the policies.
all policies, right?
We have-
Okay.
We have a motion and a second.
And that was the questions and comments. Can I get a roll call?
Mrs. Corey? Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes. Okay, our enrollment seems to be staying steady at 661. Do we have anything for under miscellaneous?
I have 2 things. First thing, Sean, if at all possible, any letters that are sent to the parents, can they be also copied to the board so the board knows what's going out? I mean, I've had,
Absolutely.
not recently, but in the past, I've had people make comments to me about letters that have come out, and I have never seen the letters.
Yeah, that's
So-
actually been something that we identified, Vicky, is the way that our system was sending things out. And I've asked to make sure we're sending things home to make sure the board members get it as well.
Okay, I appreciate that.
No
And
problem.
the other thing is, thank you. I saw the sign was finally working.
Yes, we're very happy about that. It seems as though there's a few things that are a little bit different in the sign than they were before. We're still trying to work out some of the new kinks, but the sign is finally up and running again.
Anybody else for miscellaneous? Any unfinished business? Any new business?
Yeah, under new business, because it's probably the appropriate time. I know we've talked a lot about our instructional models, things we're doing and how we can improve. I'd like to tell you that we are looking more into right now, moving to implementing the addition of live streaming in some way, shape, or form. Again, part of the big thing is, as you saw tonight, and again, thank you for approving Kyle Calderwood. We're looking to have him join our team. Obviously, he'll be our new technology coordinator, replacing Jason after he does leave us. And Jason, again, thank you for your service. And we want to make sure that Kyle has a lot of input into how we can do this the best way. Because again, as we talked about in the past, a lot of live streaming models from talking to other districts talk about the use of multiple devices and things like that in the classroom to make sure it's effective. And if we're going to do any sort of purchasing of new devices, cameras, and so on, that Kyle's going to be obviously overseeing having his hands on to make sure they're run properly and so on. I think it's vital that he has his input in that. So now that he is approved, I look forward to having conversations with him to get his input as to what we can do to make sure that if we are going to implement live streaming, it's done properly, it's done effectively, and it'll be done in a way that's going to enhance learning and opportunities for our older students.
Okay, and that will be for the older students?
That's correct. It seems right now, I think that it's best used for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders as a tool. That would shift quite a lot of what we were doing. Like I said, there's also, I'm talking to the teachers. I want to make sure that since it would be a dramatic shift in a lot of what's being implemented, that if we're going to do that, that requires professional development, again, to make sure it's being done properly. We don't just want to have some sort of a dramatic shift without making sure that our teachers are supported, that we find out what their needs. And again, the part of that is, as I'm talking a lot to the other superintendents, to other principals in the area, as well as our team is too, to find out of what things have been done to make sure it's being effective in the areas that it has been done. And again, this would be another way for us to try to enhance what we're doing this year to make sure our students that are at home are seeing a little bit more and able to communicate on a more active basis with those older grades. And it's something, again, I want to emphasize with the older grades, because live streaming is not necessarily something that's suitable for all grades. And the reason why I'm, again, think about putting a kindergartner in front of a screen for 4 hours a day would be a very tough thing, just watching what's going on, being frustrated if they couldn't actively participate in what's going on. So again, we're looking at doing something that is trying to be effective with the students that is there, or trying to enhance what we're doing. And that's the big thing. We want to make sure that anything we're going to do is only going to improve our educational opportunities for our students, not take anything away.
Excellent news.
Yep. I also
Any-
just wanted to say thank you to Jason. I know we've been on a couple of projects together. Appreciate your time in the district. Wanted to say welcome to Kyle. Do we have a potential start date for Kyle?
Well, he just got approved tonight, Dan. So usually it's with 60 days after.
So he's got to give his 60 to get out. Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason I ask is I know you're going to want to lean very heavily on Kyle to help guide the right decisions. I certainly understand that. We also have to think about when the kids, hopefully, fingers crossed, come back in January. And if there's a way to have things in place to have that start at the return of school in January, that would be ideal if we can make
I
the
think
right
honestly,
decisions
this is something that
going
should
into
go to ed tech. There should be an ed tech meeting with our superintendent and go through all of that. Because there are multiple factors that we have to come into play, budgeting, long-term, things of that nature. And I think that probably we should have an ed tech meeting for our next committee of the whole.
Well, we've already had the ed tech meeting to talk about projected budget for it. Yes.
Well, that was, again, I want to make sure that we have, to Megan's point, I'll hopefully be able to have prior to our next, well, I don't want to say what time frame, but I have to find out more input, Dan, because one of the big things is, in terms of trying to make something like that happen that quickly, is the purchase again of new materials and the shipping dates and stuff like that too. So I need to find out if we're going to purchase devices again and spend this large amount of money to make this effective. I'm not looking to have these devices be something we're purchasing for a 1-year usage. Ideally, we're finding something that, as we're calling this, is maybe these devices are initially the secondary devices for the teachers. Eventually, they'll be the primary devices of our teachers. Our teacher devices we're using for most part in the classrooms are getting close to end of life cycle. So I'd rather us not spend low just to get something for this year. I'd rather spend appropriately to do something that's going to help our district in the long run as well.
I'm with you.
As I said, I want to make sure that I'm not just looking for what's the fastest thing we can get, but something to help us not just this year, but moving forward, and not just educationally, but also in terms of budgetarily as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and Sean, I want to make sure that we're being careful here, that we don't have devices sitting here before we've adequately trained the staff and have a fully built out plan to implement anything, because the last thing we need to do right now is spend money and just have a device sitting here, because that's not a route we can be going.
I agree, Kevin. That's why I said I want to make sure that I'm learning more from others. I'm having those conversations, and I want to make sure that we are putting everyone in the right position for success. And again, I don't think it's something that we can just simply say live stream is as simple as putting a device on your classroom, turning it on, and you're good to go. It's a completely different infrastructure. It's a completely different model of education that we are currently using. And again, I think we are the current model, truthfully, if you look at it, going back to Melissa's presentation, there's a lot of positives in what we were doing, that, a lot of districts are experiencing a negative growth. We are not. We still, I know some of the areas we're not as much as we'd like, but there's a lot of positives. So this in no way, shape, or form is a reflection on our teachers, on our educational system we are currently using. I do think that our flip model is a very effective model. We're looking at something that's going to further enhance that model. But again, we spend a lot of our time when we came back to school of training our staff and making sure that they had the tools necessary to make the flip model successful. If we were going to transition to a live streaming model, we have to make sure we're doing the same thing. We cannot set our staff up for failure. That's not fair to them, and it's
Yeah,
not fair to, especially to our students, to simply say that the target date of January 2nd. And again, I know it makes sense on the calendar purpose, but it's almost arbitrary unless we can find out to make sure we have time for training, which we don't have any PD days before then. We're going to have to try to transition into our use of our staff meetings in terms of our team meetings and other ways to find time to train the staff to make sure they feel comfortable and knowledgeable in what's doing it, to make sure our technology is in place. And again, I am incredibly hesitant going back to the 60-day time until Kyle gets here to say that we should implement something that's so technologically dependent without an actual technology coordinator in our buildings for full time. Because heaven forbid we say, here's our go live date. And let's use the example of, the return date of winter break. And we don't have that technology staff in the building. Again, now what? Now we have all these kids sitting in front of computers. We don't have our flip model developed at that point in time with everything else. And now we've set everyone else up to fail. So I love we're looking into this. I cannot put my finger on here's a specific go date right now until we have a more comfortable time for me, as I said, to talk to Kyle, to talk to the teachers, to find out more of what we need to put in their hands to make sure they're successful, and therefore our students are successful this year as well.
Yeah, Sean, I'm fully on board with all that, and I'm not looking to lock in January 2nd as the date. That's not my intention here. My intention is to do what we can, the best as we can, as quickly as we can to make the right decisions. I don't want more time to go by. We're in the middle of November. We need to have this plan in place, and it's not like we don't have a tech coordinator in the building today. So while I understand you want to wait for the start of your new hire to really make sure you nail this, we can certainly be starting to have some of these conversations today, I would think.
And please, Dan, that's not what I was saying, that we are going to start having those conversations effective
Okay.
tomorrow. It wasn't that we're waiting for Kyle to come on board for the conversations. My point is, I don't think it makes sense to have our start date of implementation of all these things technologically until we have the support in the building.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask to make sure that the board has a full understanding of exactly what that plan is, what the timeline is, and everything else associated with this before it comes to a vote.
Absolutely.
And especially given, I hate to be pessimistic, but we are seeing more districts moving to remote, full remote. The COVID case numbers are going up. I also have concerns beyond just the technical end of implementing this very fast. And I know you did your numbers for K to 8, not necessarily 6 to 8 on some of these. So those cost breakdowns that we had in tech is not necessarily apples to apples here. We're talking about, subsets, but seeing a lot of school districts, I know Berlin just pulled through January 4th, and I'm not suggesting that we do it at this time by any stretch, but I also don't want to end up seeing us investing a whole lot of money and then 3, 4, 5 days later finding out that the state is making decisions for us. Because we don't want to be, spending money for no good reason. We want to do to help our students.
To that point, Megan, I think that's why it's so important that we use our time to do the research to find out what devices are best to put in people's hands, how to properly implement it and make sure it's going there. At the same point in time, like you said, I believe we're seeing a lot of areas that are going, you said till January. I'm seeing till the end of January in some areas in different spots in Jersey. And again, I don't want to just say we're spending money for the sake of spending money. And again, that's why I said if we're going to end up purchasing these things, it's something that I'm looking at is not just improving our district for this year. It's something that'll be used in the future as well, because we are going to have those conversations soon in terms of what we are going to use as our next devices for our staff. And ultimately, we're getting to the point where all the students that are currently using our MacBooks, those devices are nearing their end of life as well too. So we are going to have some major technological discussions in terms of purchases that's going to have regardless of our situations. So if we're going to end up doing something like this, that ultimately is going to end up putting our district in a better perspective moving forward in terms of its budget by, taking some of the lumps out of it now, if we can, that's something we may have to look into as well.
Thank you. Anybody else with new business? Anybody, sorry, public comment? Back to the public comment time. Anybody have any public comments? I really can't see anything now because I had to switch to my phone. I apologize.
There are two. The first I'm seeing is Mr. Curley.
Okay, Mr. Crilly?
Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. Tom Curley, 28th Lane, also the Tabernacle Education Association co-president. There's been a lot of talk about models and learning. For the past 10 weeks, it's only been 10 weeks, we've been operating under this hybrid model of instruction and learning. And during this time, we've also applied that flipped classroom model to better serve the needs of those kids who are at home. It adds flexibility to the families and to those kids to serve those students to better serve while respecting also the schedule that the virtual learners have and their families too, of course. Now, this model is definitely not perfect. We all understand that, and we get the idea of wanting to find something else that may work. But I'm not sure any model is really perfect. Even when we go back to normal, teachers are always trying to find different things to better reach and better serve our kids. But it's encouraging through the data that Melissa showed today, through additional testing in our classrooms and feedback from parents and staff. This model has Tabernacle students learning and growing. We're happy to also see that Tabernacle has put the trust in the educational professionals and their expertise to select and implement that model to make it work for our students. We hope that if we are willing to change a model, like you guys have talked about before, with all of the educators in mind and also all the stakeholders in mind. I'm sorry? Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yeah, you glitched just
you can
for
hear
a
me?
second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. So guys, basically all I'm saying is, it's been 10 weeks and it seems like it's been forever, this whole pandemic, this whole issue. But in 10 weeks, the administration and the staff has been working together to evaluate, adjust, and grow this learning environment and made improvements to the current model. And because of these improvements, we have now been able to teach one-on-one with students. We've been able to meet with students in smaller groups, both virtually and in person. And we also are giving that flexibility to the virtual learners and their families so they can learn when it fits their schedule, while also allowing them to communicate with their peers and their teachers during those afternoon meetings and those office hours. So the current model has worked. In just those 10 weeks, we've completely adjusted our way of educating and teaching and learning. And we've done this with success due to a team effort. I hope that continues as we continue to talk about any types of changes for the model. The association is committed to the consistency that this current model has provided, and we're committed to working with administration to make the adjustments to make it better for Tabernacle students and families when it makes sense. I'd also like to mention that Tabernacle is making some pretty some news around the county and also the state. Not only are we home to the Burlington County Teacher of the Year, Michael Dunley, we are also home to the Burlington County Educational Support Professional, Sandy Bogley. So I'd be remiss to not mention them and give them the highlight that they deserve. Tabernacle's making some good news here, and I think we all would love to see that continue with some of the decisions that we make in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Sandy. I saw it on Facebook. I hope she's on here. Yeah, really. Yay. She's excellent. I love her. Any other comments?
Yes, Kelly's iPhone has a hand.
Kelly?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Kelly Kemp, 600 Lane. I have a comment question. My comment is when my daughter gets up at 6:30 in the morning, she's not always ready to eat like most humans. And by the time she gets home 6 hours later, she is starving. So my question is, why are we not able to allow the kids to have a snack in school when all the surrounding schools are allowing this? I don't really understand with the social distancing and the hand wipes that can be utilized, why this is a problem.
We actually do have our elementary students eating because they've always had a snack during their schedule. The 6, 7, and 8 students didn't usually have a snack when they're doing a half-day schedule. So we maintained that type of situation. That was really our impetus, that we were trying to maintain what was there for those younger students and not necessarily add something additionally. You're saying that your daughter's coming in the past, Ms. Kemps, if I may ask, when we had the half days, was that an issue during those times as well?
They always have had snacks every year. They've never not had snacks. And on the half days, they would have pretzels brought in or something. There was always something, because honestly, I mean, I think most people feel the same way. If you're starving and hungry, you can't really think straight, and it's hard to, get through learning when you're really hungry. So, and I know that, I'm sure there's staff that's having snacks during the school hours. So I just feel that our older kids should be allowed this time too.
Okay. Well, thank you for the input. We'll talk to our team about that.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any comments?
Leah Haas.
Leah?
Hi, Leah Haas, 211 Oak Lane. Out of curiosity, my daughter is in 3rd grade and they have the opportunity, which is wonderful, to get the library on the cart, where the librarian goes around with the books for the children, to pick and bring home. What opportunities do you have actually for the older grade levels, such as like 6th, 7th, and 8th? Because my son hasn't had an opportunity yet to take home a book.
Students can still access the library through their teacher. If there's something that your son would like to have interest in Ms. Haas, if he can express to his reading teacher, his language arts teacher, we can make sure that we get some library books brought in for them to check out. The books are still available to our students.
Okay, perfect. Because I think I should own stock in Amazon these days by ordering all his books through them.
Anybody else with any comments?
Rebecca Warren.
Rebecca?
Rebecca Warren, 18 Worrell Road. I was trying to listen, and I'm just curious if I can ask Mr. Bannon to answer the question again. If a child is homesick, like now in the day of COVID, right? Somebody might send their kid because they had allergies and now they're allergies, so now they're staying home. Is that something that they're able to log in and say that they're learning virtual at home? I don't know if I really understood his answer. Like, I know that was a discussion about absences and things like that Mr. Dilks brought up, and I 100% agree with what Dan was saying. So I'm just curious what Mr. Van's answer was.
Yes, Ms. Warren. For those days, we just ask that you notify us, because again, staff are expecting certain kids during those sessions. So we like to make sure that we're giving a notification, especially because some of the small groupings, depending on the grades that they have, it's not necessarily dependent where a kid can just drop in on a given day, especially when it comes to our K-5, the way that they have some small groups, that they'd want to make sure that that child knows which group to come into and so on. So that's the difficulty on that. It's not as clean as just here you are on this day based on the way that our groupings arrangements are made in the afternoon. 6, 7, 8, it's a little bit easier because again, in the afternoon, they're following the schedule that is an on course on a day-to-day basis. But again, we try to give our staff the heads up notification if they're supposed to expect a new student coming in that room, because they have certain things that are planned for that group of students on that day as well. So it is a little bit more difficult educationally, just jump in on any given day.
Right. Because I know I heard somewhere that our school rating is affected by our attendance too. So I'm just curious how, I just want to make sure that we're doing all we can to keep that rating up.
Absolutely. And again, we are doing everything we can to keep that rating up, but I also want to make sure our reports are as accurate as possible too.
Right. And I have two high schoolers that are BCIT, and they would never be the high schoolers that would say, I'm going to stay home in bed. They're dying to get in there. They're never in the school. So there must be the exception to the rule. I'm just saying.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments?
Not that I see.
I have one real quick, if you guys don't mind. Keith Anslick, 29 North Drive. It seems, well, I'll give you a little backstory here. My wife obviously quit her job so that she can stay home and essentially teach my kids on Monday, Wednesdays, and every other Friday. And there was another neighbor about 2 doors down, and she just took an unpaid leave of absence so she can stay home with her kids as well. I guess my comment is we're pretty good at shutting things down, and we don't seem that good at opening them back up. So I'm not sure exactly what the guidelines were for shutting everything down at these other places, and kind of like what we need to see here in order to go back to school full time? In other words, does it need to be a decrease in cases, a decrease in deaths, or even possibly like the introduction of a vaccine?
Mr. Ansel, it actually would be a major change from the DOE's guidelines right now. Everything we have to follow is based on the DOH guidelines. And as it stands right now, they have not changed anything in terms of the social distancing requirements for the schools. So I can't tell you what specifically, going to your point as to which number they're looking at that would cause a change. I don't have that information, but we will react accordingly once the DOE makes any adjustments, any changes to social distancing requirements to make sure that our buildings are ready to have more of our students return.
So there's essentially, we have no idea of what needs to happen in order to go back to school full time until someone says that we're allowed. And they're basing that on like no actual guidelines, like cases, vaccines, nothing. I'm just trying to get clear.
No, I understand you're just asking the question. I have not had them say anything like here's this one defining characteristic. I apologize. I wish I could tell you here's the one thing. I have not been able to get that myself.
Okay. Makes sense.
Any other comments? Jason, anything?
Kelly's iPhone has a hand up again. I thought I lowered it. Do you have
Yes, I'm raising my hand again. Thank you. Going back to what the last person just said, why can we not go full day every other day?
There are a lot of other restrictions that would be caused by that, including there are a lot of limitations we have based on our current usage of facilities in terms of using it for lunches. There are a lot of other limitations that were put in place in terms of staffing, additional staffing needs that we'd have to hire, again, based on additional cleanliness standards and things like that if we were to open up. And again, right now, I think I know from talking to other districts, a lot of them are having the same conversation in terms of it when it's available. They'd love to see us. First step would be to move more towards a 5-day-a-week half day and then see how that goes and go from there. But again, right now, a lot of it's the limitations. And again, I think we're looking at it's a difficult time being in the building for our students as long as they are under the current restrictions, especially you're talking with our K-5 students who do not move at all during the day. They stay in their classroom for 4 hours straight. And if you're talking about increasing that longer to a full day, that's really hard for these kids too. So I think we have to really take into consideration the social emotional well-being of the students and keeping them in that format too. But again, we're hopeful that we will see proper responses. And again, going back to Mr. Angelo's question, hopefully we get some more answers in terms of when we can open more up, and we'll respond accordingly from all those things.
Is there a plan? Is there something being planned right now for when we are able to go back to school? And will parents be informed of the plan so we can start preparing?
In which way, Mrs. Kemps? I'm so sorry.
For our kids to come back
Full time?
I mean, yes.
As it stands right now, if the state told us to go back full time, we would just need to have the protocol in place in terms of time frame for us to put all the furniture back that needs to be back to be able to have more students in our buildings. And that's really the biggest change. And then we can extrapolate from there or schedule to a full day environment. But right now, from any of the indications, any of the conversations I've had with the DOE or DOH, I am not anticipating any of that happening in the near future.
But we are we are going to be prepared if that does happen, correct?
We absolutely are.
I guess my other question would be, wouldn't it make more sense if we don't have enough staffing for I know some districts have their elementary kids going different times than the older kids. Would it make more sense for us to put our money towards hiring additional staffing to cleaning the schools instead of purchasing equipment that might not ever get used, that, by the time we figure out how to use it, we might be back in school full time anyway. So I'm just wondering why the staff we have now is not enough to handle our kids full day, and could we hire additional staff with that money to clean the schools?
One of the biggest limitations, Ms. Kemps, is because of the way that when we combine our grades into the schools we have right now, of having most of our students in the Olson Middle School, when we devised all of that and maximized everything, it was done obviously in a pre-COVID environment. It was done in an environment that would have our lunches be 6, 7, 8 all eating lunch together, 4 or 5 eating a lunch, and 2, 3 eating lunch together, or K1 each lunch across the street. It was to maximize our space because the cafeteria or the APR, all-purpose room in OMS, would be used when it's not used for lunches, is going to be used as a gymnasium space. Based on our current schedule and everything we can right now, and based on the social distancing, obviously we cannot have that mass number of people in those cafeteria spaces at any point in time. So we'd be in a position right now, instead of being able to use that because of the amount of time those spaces are being used for gymnasium space, to have to eat lunches in our classrooms, which would be a major change. So therefore, all of our staff would be forced to have their lunchtime in the classroom with their students. We then would have to hire additional custodians to clean, because again, instead of cleaning the one larger locations of the cafeteria of the APR, you're then talking about making sure that every single classroom is being properly cleaned and making sure there's no other issues in there, because heaven forbid we had a lot of food left over and drop waste and so on. Then you're talking about other issues in the building in terms of pests and so on. So it's a lot of other little trickle down effects that are caused by our current limitations.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments?
Not that I see.
All right.
You do, you got Fran just raising her hand. I thought I
I'm
saw-
here. I'll just interrupt Meg. Meg, I'm talking.
Hey, Fran. Fran Gillis, go ahead.
Fran Gillis, 3 Avenue A. To continue on to Kelly's, Mrs. Kemp's comment, we're lumping K through 8 into one, even though we're separating times. So Melissa just talked about how 6th, 7th, and 8th, the math scores are low. So why can't we do 6th, 7th, and 8th full day in the same cohort? You know, if, you know, half days, I'm sorry, excuse me, full day, Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday, or, you know, extend their days, and not the littles, because as we know, the littles don't do well with the virtual. So why are we still lumping them as one? Why can't we still treat them as 2 separate? And that would help with the spacing. That's my first comment.
It still has to do, Ms. Gillis, with the combined spacing. Even if we did extrapolate, like you're saying, in one group to the other, they're still occupying the same space in Olson. So that's why, excuse me.
Bless you.
That's why we're looking at it that way in many ways, that it is still the same space that they're using in there, and also and how that would impact certain things.
Okay.
But I
And
understand
then,
your point and trying to look at the students in a different way.
okay. And then my other thing is with all the students being home as much as they are, and as parents, we do depend on each other. Sometimes we group them together anyway. I know we're not supposed to, but we do, because we have to depend on each other to help. Some of the drug assemblies that we have, I know before COVID, we were allowed to have like an adult version of the drug assemblies. We just recently had one. I know my 8th grader did. He said it was about a skateboarder whose mom was a drug addict. Is there a way we can kind of, I don't know, advance some of these 8th graders' drug talks? Because they're going into high school next year. My 8th grader doesn't even know how long a high lasts. And I don't know how many of you adults on this little Hollywood Squares here knows how long a high lasts. These kids need to know these things. You need to educate them. If they're at home while the parents are working, because some of us are, there's prescription drugs in the house. They have no idea what they look like. Some prescription drugs look like Orbit gum. Some Tic Tacs look like speed. Like there's gotta be a a higher drug education for these kids. Just saying no is not enough anymore. They're in 8th grade going into high school. So, I mean, I know what I talk to my kids about, but I know where I came from. Not everybody came from where I came from. So we might want to kind of upgrade that a little bit.
I'll
So I'm
talk-
just throwing that out there.
Well, thank you for the input on that one, Mrs. Gillis. We'll talk with our counseling team and with our our student assistance coordinator. So I know that's definitely a big push, especially with our municipal alliances, is very strong on that one as well.
Okay.
We've actually had conversations in terms of, as you mentioned, one of those things obviously is tough this year of doing assemblies is the benefit or lack thereof at times of virtual assemblies. And even we had those conversations, and I'll ask you as a parent here, if we were able to arrange for a parental meeting at nighttime, is that something that you envisioned yourself and others wanting to attend?
Well, yeah, because there was something mentioned at one of the parent assemblies that I couldn't make 2 years ago when my other son was there. And the gentleman made a statement that you will always chase your first high. And I asked the parent, I said, did they say that to the kids? And she didn't know, because obviously she didn't go to the kid one, she went to the adult one. And that's something the kids need to hear, because that's a powerful statement. Because that's how overdoses happen. And obviously we're in COVID now. So you're talking 26, 30% higher in opiate addiction, suicide, drug overdoses, because of, people out of work and everything else. So what are they finding at home? And 8th grade also, you're talking about their wisdom teeth coming out. What do they get handed? And I know the adults are supposed to, I get that. Adults are supposed to handle it, but they're handed painkillers when they get their wisdom teeth pulled. And now, your parent goes to work. It happens, So these things have to be made aware, and these kids don't know. They live in this little tabernacle bubble. And I did not grow up in this little tabernacle bubble. So I show my kids certain things, and I'm just saying, like, they're going into high school next year. And I know the other mom on here, her kids go to BCIT. My son goes to BCIT. Nathan hopefully will get there. Now you're mixing, like they said, 40 different townships into one. Now those townships aren't in the little bubble that we're in here, out here in Tabernacle. It's a little different, So we just got to educate them a little bit more. Maybe a little show and tell. I know we have some cops on here somewhere that can bring in a little show and tell. They need to see it. They need to be aware.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Gillis.
Yep.
Anybody else? Public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to miscellaneous. Anybody have anything for miscellaneous?
We already did miscellaneous. It was on there twice.
What's on there twice? Let's see, I'm a trained monkey. I just followed a list. All right, since we've already done it, how about who's gonna race for it since Brian's not here? Adjournment.
I have it, please.
Dan.
Why not?
Second,
Right
Judy.
into it, Judy. Judy second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second.
All opposed? Anybody abstain? Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.